Well, there's one other thing that I want to talk about because I think it's important, and that's, as I think all of you know, yesterday Charlie Kirk was murdered. He was assassinated by a coward, and Alice and I are in the talking business, and we're in the arguing business, and we take positions that are not always popular. We talk about cases where people feel very strongly, and we have taken positions that I think have made people angry. And I'm sure there are people out there who think the world would be a better place if we didn't have this podcast. But I got to tell you, when I go somewhere like CrimeCon, I never think that somebody could show up and decide, you know, on their own that they're going to put an end to that. We meet with you guys, we don't have security, we hug you, we take pictures, we talk to you. And that's the way I want it to be. And that's the world I want to live in. And I think it's really important when something like this happens that everyone condemns it unequivocally. And it doesn't matter what you think about someone's views or their politics or their positions. I don't even like it when people preface this stuff with, I didn't agree with him, but this is wrong. You shouldn't have to do that. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm not criticizing you, but you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to worry that somebody's going to think just because you say someone shouldn't be murdered for their positions that they're going to suddenly think I agree with them. No, that should just be the universal opinion, and it should be something that we all come together on. That's the world I want to live in. Alice and I were traveling yesterday when the news broke, and all I wanted to do was get home to my kids, and when I got home, my daughter was asleep, and I went into her room, and she woke up and she saw me, and she was so happy. And all I could think was, his kids are never going to see him again. They're never going to have that. They're never going to get to hug their dad because someone disagreed with him so much they decided to murder him. And I'm sorry, I don't think there's any gray area here, and I don't think you should either. And even if you don't want to do it because you think it's the right thing, do it selfishly, because let me tell you, it never ends. And it's never just one side. Every time something like this happens, somebody will say, oh, violence in the country. Welcome to the 1960s. Yeah. You remember the 1960s? Lots of people got shot and they got killed, and they were on both sides of the political spectrum. And was it a good thing? No. Robespierre liked political violence so much that they called it the terror. And the guillotine that he used on his enemies was eventually used on him. So I think all of us need to be able to come together when something like this happens and just condemn it. I don't need a discussion. We don't need to talk about what the person thought on anything. Just condemn it. It is the heart of American democracy. It is everything we believe, that people should be able to disagree without fear of being killed because of what they think. And that goes for both sides. And it was just something I wanted to talk about.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up. I honestly didn't know if I would be strong enough to be able to talk about that. But since you've brought it up, we didn't cancel tonight, even though we had planned on talking tonight, even though I have zero interest in talking to anybody today, because as Brett said, what happened yesterday, the reason our country was founded, the country that I was born into, but that my ancestors are not from, the reason my parents came here, the reason that I have everything in my life is because this is a country based on the fact that we can have discourse, the First Amendment. We are able to speak. And so yesterday when the news broke, Brett and I were together, he saw me cry unendingly while the Uber driver asked us unending questions.
Unending questions.
And I could not, barely pull myself together. But we didn't cancel tonight because we do believe in discourse. We don't believe in violence. We said that from the very beginning of this podcast is many of you will disagree with us, and I welcome it. Brett and I disagree on West Memphis 3. And by the way, on lots of other things that maybe you guys don't even see because it's not on the podcast, because our entire lives are not on the podcast. And that's the thing. We speak because we care about these issues, and we respect people no matter which side of the aisle you're on. If there are these aisles, if you speak with an intent to understand the other and to change hearts and minds through words and not through violence. Yes, when you pick up a gun and you steal away someone's life, whoever is on the other end of that is a cowardly movement. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you're using violence versus words. And this applies in so many situations, but especially yesterday because Charlie was murdered in front of his family and thousands of people watching, people knowing that it would be all over the internet because obviously people were filming. They did that rather than have a conversation with him. When that happens, it is the absolute crumbling of society, not just the American society. I know many of you who listen are not American. It's not just about that. When we stop talking, we do devolve into chaos and tyranny and self-destruction. There is no way forward if we can't have discourse. And we love all of you. A bunch of you have left, the live, which is fine because this is a very heavy topic. But I think it's so important. And this is why we do this podcast. So oftentimes people, at CrimeCon, I don't know how many of you asked us, why do you do the podcast? Or why do you do the podcast and still, amidst your day jobs and all your kids? And the reason we do it is we believe in discourse. We believe in having intelligent discourse with all of you. We've said that to so many of you in person just last week. We believe that you can use your brains and talk and know that many of you disagree with us about cases. It doesn't even have to be about, like metaphysical issues. It could be about a case where we can disagree and have vibrant and, amazing conversation because we are all individuals with dignity and we are all different. That's why we disagree. And that is a beautiful thing. And so there is not some beautiful, wonderful point here because this is a tragedy and it seems senseless and it is senseless. And I can't wrap this up into a pretty bow and I'm not going to, except to say, talk with each other, talk with us. Never turn to violence. When you do, it is the beginning of the end. And I don't want to believe that this is the beginning of the end. This is a country that I'm so glad I get to be here. What other child of immigrants with parents who didn't speak English when they came here can say that they not only graduated from, high school, but then got to go to the premier institutions that no one in my, stage of life should ever get to go to. It's impossible, except when you have this democratic way, this way that treats people as people with dignity, that I'm not put into a box because of the way I look, for whatever characteristics I am. And I believe in that version of freedom.
And look, I mean, we talked about earlier jury duty and how people can have an impact. The good news is that the number of people out there who would actually do something like this, I hope is very small. Bad news, like I said, we have almost 400 million people in this country. But I think all of us do have something to contribute. I don't think it is a coincidence that as our rhetoric has gotten more heated and more violent and more angry and more hate-filled, that you are seeing stuff like this more and more. Somebody tried to kill the governor of Pennsylvania. They just burn his house down. Like, nobody even talks about that, right? Somebody mentioned Minnesota. There were legislators murdered in Minnesota. You have this. You had two people who tried to kill Trump during the election.
I went to, school mass with my kids this morning, and us parents pulled together money to make sure that there was a police officer standing outside the doors.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there with my 7-year-old, and we have to explain why the doors are locked and there's a police officer outside, and it's not touch a truck day. It's to make sure that we can go into a house of worship in the morning with elementary school kids.
Yeah, because somebody decided that the way to make a political point is to shoot up a mass. And I know there's some mental health issues there as well, but remember, people who have mental health issues are more susceptible to this kind of rhetoric. And so maybe just all of us as individuals could try and tone it down a little bit It doesn't mean you have to agree with anybody. I mean, you can oppose people vociferously. You can oppose them every step of the way. You can organize against them. You can vote against them. You can raise money. You can run for office. There's so much you can do without all that comes with it: the hate, the anger, the violent talk, the rhetoric. It is possible.
And this is the way I deal with it. Everyone deals with it differently. Clearly, Brett deals with it differently. But can I suggest, if you feel that volume being turned up, or you feel, hatred rising up in you, because it's hard not to be angry about these things. And it's okay to be angry, by the way. Just anger is good. Resentment is not, because that's when awful things happen. Step away from social media. Look, we exist on social media. We get that. Step away from social media for a day, for longer, whatever you need. When in moment of crisis, don't turn to X, don't turn to Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Step away and go hug a tree, quite literally. Go hug a person, go have a conversation with a person. The reason CrimeCon was so incredible, and we talked about this last time, was we got to see you guys in person. We didn't just get to read emails from you or see your chats while we're doing this, or respond to you in DMs and our, social medias. We got to see you, and that was so much better, to get to hug you and see you and talk to you in person than just talk to you through the internet. Because we are special. Humans are special. And there is absolutely nothing that can stand in the place of real human interaction. So that's what I do. As some of you joke, that I do monitor what's going on online, but I've taken a very deliberate step in the last couple of years to step away from social media, specifically because of this, because I know that I can be very emotional, and I can feel kind of the volume turn up in myself as I see it around me. And by the way, the algorithms on the social media, it is written in order to turn up the volume. And so you know yourself best, and you know what you can handle. But for me, I know that means, for example, that I just don't read the 1-star reviews. That's good for me. That is very good for me. So please keep leaving your 1-star reviews. Never going to see them. That's just how I deal with it. But find ways that you yourself can do that, and how we can help too. We try to use explanations when we have, it's great to have strong opinions, but be able to explain them. And we've said that, from day one as well, because if you can explain them, then you're not just running on emotion alone, you're running on reason.
And look, we don't pretend to be perfect on this. Nobody is. All you can do is the best you can do. Last thing I'll say on this: Murder Shelf Book Club talked about how tolerance is a virtue. I would just remind people that tolerance, you don't tolerate things you like. Tolerance means accepting other people who you really don't like and totally disagree with, right? That is a virtue. And I think it's really the heart of not only our country's democracy, but really all of them. And just remember, free speech, freedom, representative government isn't the thing that we've had for most of our history. For most of our history, we have not been free. You have not been able to say what you want. It's authoritarianism, dictatorship, monarchy. That's how people have been ruled. And we're trying to preserve, as Benjamin Franklin said when he was walking out of the Constitutional Convention, and someone asked him, what do we have, a republic or a monarchy? And he said, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. And that's the whole point, is these are things that every generation has to preserve, and that's the task that's before us now. So thanks for letting us rant about that, but it was something I thought it was important to talk about.
No, I think that's right. Thanks for being brave enough to bring it up.
No, I just can't shut up. That's my problem.
No, that's the fact that I can shut up tells you how deeply it affects all of us.
Yeah.